afternoon, good people. After this brief makeup tutorial, let's get back to the topic at hand, which isn't completely unrelated to the question of the makeup video, that of The Body Shop. Now, if you remember, a week ago, we discussed the beginning of this podcast, which was dedicated to Anita Roddick, who founded The Body Shop in Brighton in the 1970s. We'd explained that The Body Shop is a place that sells skincare. And if you remember, we said that it had opened up after she managed to get £4,000 as a loan from the bank, and no more because she was wearing a Bob Dylan t-shirt. Her big idea was that there was a new market for body products. She had seen Polynesian women rub cocoa butter on their breasts, on their bellies, and they had very velvety, very soft skin. Brighton in the 1970s is not a place I could visit to make you travel there, but I did go to Brighton in 2009, so there we are in Brighton. Now, point number 2 had to do with local undertakers. The idea was that she got her fast free burst of publicity in the very beginning, when she decided to call her shop The Body Shop, which was seen as a bad idea by the people next door to her, who were undertakers and were scared that people would think that she was selling body parts. She sold 15 different products in urine sample bottles, because these were cheap, displaying pictures of the places from which she'd picked up the ideas for her products. Now, she explains that her husband had a business brain and that he helped her set up the business. That being said, the word that she uses to describe herself and her husband is the word hick. And if you remember, we discussed the meaning of hick, which we said was a bit like a person that wasn't very bright and that lived in the back of beyond, which leads me to this movie recommendation. So that's first the meaning of the word hick. An ignorant countryman or a silly fellow. I noticed that the Oxford English Dictionary is suggesting as well a booby. And it leads me to this. Here is the movie recommendation. A bunch of hicks with basically a bunch of deadly weapons who accidentally get mistaken for serial killers, but are not really serial killers, they're just hicks. So if you want to know about the definition of the word hick, watch the movie called Tucker and Dale versus Evil, which is displayed on your screen. That leads to the question of the expansion of The Body Shop. It doesn't actually lead to the question of the expansion of The Body Shop because it's really unrelated, but you'll have to forgive this. Let's just talk about expansion very simply. Within 2 years, Anita and her husband had opened a shop in Brussels, and they also had shops on the high streets of Britain. The design of the shops was unusual. It was fresh, it was colourful, and it also would be a place where there would be information about her products, because she really liked to tell the story of her products. Now, Anita Roddick was came from a family of immigrants, and therefore she knew the value of service. The example that she gives was that the cafes that they owned as immigrants would open before the British opened and closed after the British closed. So they had basically longer periods during which people could actually come and enjoy a coffee early on in the morning, especially if you've got to think that Brighton would have been a place where there would be fishermen, and they get up quite early in the morning. So she really understood the value of service as an immigrant. Now, was she a pioneer is the next question. Why would she be a pioneer, you ask, just like Jean-Paul asks. This is Jean-Paul, he's sponsoring today's video. Okay, Jean-Paul. Well, she wanted her products to be environmentally friendly, which was not the norm back then. Nowadays, this seems like a very basic thing to do, but back then it was a pioneering move. At the time, the recording says that capitalism and environmentalism had not met yet. Environmentalists were regarded as cranks. Cranks is a word that refers to people who are just a bit weird, a bit loopy, a bit doolally, a bit eccentric. Her business did not appear to be viable at first. Her prospects would have been rather gloomy if not for her personality, her optimism, and her desire to do something good for the environment, but also for animals, which leads us to today's game, the guessing of what type of animals you have on your screen. If you guess the right animals, then you can get extra chocolates next week. Okay, so which animal is this? I'll let you guess. Pay attention to the head. Now, her personality, her optimism was actually on assets. She was an innovating woman who refused to be put down, so she was very resilient, and that kept her going. The people who opened franchises were mostly women, generally speaking. And her business was committed to ethical principles. Like, for instance, not testing products on animals, something that she saw as extremely cruel. But it was not just a marketing tool or a marketing ploy, it was a real principle. She thought that animal testing for something as mundane and non-vital as a body cream was ludicrously obscene, ridiculously obscene. Now, animal number 2. Guess which one this is. And this is a hint. This is the happiest animal on earth. Now, later twists in the development of the Body Shop. Well, for one thing, what Anita Roddick thought is that she needed to be different from other cosmetic companies. So she believed that she needed to provide products that would give women a realistic idea of what they would, look like once they put the products on. Whereas the big cosmetic companies relied on what she calls puffery, exaggerated praise, to make women believe false things. Like, for instance, that they're, 22 when they're actually 55, or that kind of thing. When they are no longer very young spring chickens. She was also an early supporter of Greenpeace. And eventually the company became so successful it was put on the stock markets in 1984, at which point it was valued at £8 million. So it had become a huge success from the £4,000 that she'd borrowed back in 1976. The irony is that Thatcherism was actually good for her because she was the opposite of Thatcher in many, many ways. But actually, Thatcherism was good for her. It helped her business. Plus, they had something in common, which was unstoppability, at least according to the journalists. Her philosophy was to remain above mediocrity and insults. So she says, re-examine everything you're being told, which is not bad advice, and dismiss what insults your soul. So you can see the hippie in her as well. Okay, animal number 3. Which animal is this? Who is that cutie? Now, she became a celebrity, and that means that she was wealthy, she had money, and then she used that money to help various causes, various people. So, for instance, she invested in a hemp farm in Ontario. She helped fund the Radical magazine. She helped get the Big Issue started because she sold by the homeless to make some money in the UK. Her conclusion is that wealth obliges you to be generous. If you're wealthy, then you have to be generous. You don't have the choice because you have enough to be generous. What was unique about her as well, what made her special, is that she was not just a woman, a successful woman, but she had liberal views, which would not have been the norm. Because of her high profile, the Body Shop made money with that free publicity, which was fantastic for the company. Now, there were some people who didn't like her moral tone, who resented it, thinking that she felt alone in promoting an ethical approach to business, so they didn't necessarily very much appreciate that aspect of her personality, thinking that perhaps she had a holier than thou sort of attitude. And what got her into trouble in the US is that she put pacifist posters during the Gulf War in 1991. And there is actually even a marketing director there in the US who had to put them down. Okay, now who is this absolute cutie? You've got the adult version and the smaller baby version. Things were not always easy though. She had to sue Channel 4 for a documentary which shed doubt on her claims about refusing animal testing, saying that perhaps this wasn't the whole truth. It led to hostile publicity in the US, and the shares in the stock market fell down, they plunged. But she won. Eventually, the company was sold to L'Oreal in 2006, and that came as a huge shock to some of her supporters. Indeed, people were dismayed because they felt that she had been railing against companies like L'Oreal, criticizing their lack of ethics, and criticizing their business model, their cruelty to animals, or their lack of an ethical and environmentalist approach. And then, she just teamed up with them, so it left people quite angry, and they felt that perhaps the Body Shop had lost some of its early zest, some of its unique nature, what made it special. Okay, another animal that I'm hoping you'll be able to guess before the end of this podcast, which focuses on her philosophy and the end of her life. According to Anita Roddick, a good advert, the best advert for a shop would be a good product, a good shop, staff that are happy to do, what they do, and customers that are not overwhelmed by advertising. So in a roundabout way, what she's saying is that the best type of advertising is not too much advertising. Her model was so successful that it was copied, and the market for environmentally friendly cosmetic goods was copied as well, was spread, especially with limited animal testing expanding as well. But she describes herself as a one-song person. Sometimes we use that expression for singers, and we say this is a one-hit wonder, or this is a person who's became famous with that one song, but then there was never anything else that they produced that made them famous, and that's where she stopped there. She didn't want to do anything else. She eventually died in 2007 at the young age of 64. Having changed the habits of her customers and the behavior of her competitors, so having left quite a mark on the market. She did so with her imagination, her strong beliefs, and a good deal of bloody-mindedness. Now, she was once asked by a newspaper, the journalist tells us, what she thought was the most overrated virtue. And she said self-effacement. So I'll let you guess what she meant by that. I'll let you take a closer look at all of the animals that you've seen in these slides to try and guess what they are. And you can also, of course, use the forum to ask any question that you may have. The next steps, once you've listened listened to this audio recording or watched the video, if you were listening to the audio, it's a bit annoying not to have seen the images, so perhaps take a look at the PowerPoint though. at the slideshow. Once you've done that, get ready for next week. Listen to the podcast that is dedicated to the NHS. Look up the history of the NHS, what it is about, what it means, and watch the YouTube video of Americans being interviewed about what they think about the NHS. Feel free to tell me what you thought regarding the specific formats, what you thought about the video, the recorded video formats, and take care of yourselves. And I will see you very soon in a week's time. Take care.